Hey, coming up next, Dr. Cloud is an acclaimed leadership expert, clinical psychologist, and New York Times best-selling author. Listen to this flex, guys, 45 books, including the iconic Boundaries, have sold nearly 20 million copies worldwide. And of course, he's here today coaching us on trust. And when our trust gets broken, how do we rebound from it? When do we withhold trust? When do we know it's a good sign, good time to give trust? Great topic, I think, when we're talking about our money in our life. And interviewing him today, our good friend from our sister show, Doc G from the Earn and Invest podcast. Going to be talking to Dr. Cloud. We'll talk to him for a few minutes, breaking down the interview right at the end.
Dr. Henry Cloud, author of Trust, Knowing When to Give It, When to Withhold It, How to Earn It, and How to Fix It When It Gets Broken. Welcome to Joe's Mom's Basement. We're so happy to have you with us today.
Well, Dr. Jordan, it is a pleasure to be here. I love what you guys do.
So we are excited to jump into the conversation. We're going to be talking about trust.
I thought when I came into the basement, I'd fall into a bunch of Benjamins.
No, unfortunately, the big Benjamins only come after the show, and you get so famous that everyone buys your book.
All right. Well, I'll wait for that.
So I want to start by getting a touch personal. We're going to talk about trust in the business place, in the world in general, in relationships. But let's talk about your life. Tell me about a time in your life where someone broke your trust and the impact it had on you.
Oh, gosh. I can point to more than enough than you need to write a book about it. Hopefully the book's more about the science and the business aspects of how trust works. But yeah, we've all had our train wrecks, right? But I'll give you one I think that a lot of your audience can relate to. This was years ago. I had started a company that grew to a pretty big, sizable enterprise. And I didn't have any money when I started it. And so I had to go find the money and raise the money and bring some expertise on that I couldn't really afford. And so one of the people I brought on, I gave him a sizable chunk of stock. And long story short, it went really, really well. And we were doing great. And then I had partners who owned 40-something% of it, and they decided to sell their company. So they sold their company, which owned a little less than half of mine. And then what happened was my friend, the guy that I brought in and gave the stock to, who was a friend, they went behind my back to him and offered him a big check. And he didn't come to me once and didn't say anything. And he sold it to them. And all of a sudden, the company that I started from nothing, I had lost control of. And that was a big breach of trust. So it happens. It happens. And he wasn't a con man. I'd known him for years. So one of the things I think that I've learned over the years is that it's really helpful if we have some sort of an algorithm, that we can operate by, kind of a diagnostic tree, if you will, to think about, in this particular context, for these particular reasons, why do I hit the go button on trust with this person? Because trust, it's not a toggle switch, even though we experience it that way. Sort of like we get a feeling, we lean in to trust someone, but there's been a lot of determinants that have happened to get us to that point. And sometimes we have false positives. We can trust somebody, but we hadn't really checked the boxes we need to check for that context. And so that's basically what the book is about.
I want to talk about those check boxes in a few minutes, but before we get there, you're the guy who wrote the book on trust, and yet in a sense, you had this happen to you in business. Is the average person good at knowing who and when to trust?
Research.
That was research. So is the average person good at knowing who and when to trust?
Well, average, if we're looking at a bell curve, you got to get pretty far, probably past average, to get really good at it, or we wouldn't have as many broken relationships and failed business partnerships and all of that we have. So if you go average, I think we can all get better at it. But here's the problem: we are wired to trust. I mean, biologically, neurologically, psychologically, we're wired to trust because everything in life depends on trust. Everything. I mean, we've been sitting here for the last minute, all of us, the people that are joining us as well, and you've been breathing. Well, the reason is your entire system, all the way down your spinal cord and your gut and your olfactory system, is working to answer one question: am I safe? And it's determined that the air is okay to breathe. Now, if a fume came in, or the temperature got to a certain place, or you sniff something, before it gets to consciousness, your body has kind of moved back. So, whoa, what's that smell? I don't know if I can breathe this air or not. And so we're all wired to do this. Our baby could never grow into a child if they couldn't trust. And when they can't, we have to stimulate, the infant to start to take in attachment, to take in food. So we have to have trust. You'll never scale a business or a career if you can't trust, because you'll be doing everything by definition. So here's the problem: we're wired to trust. We do it automatically in one sense, but we learn patterns. And so we learn patterns positively and negatively. When you say the average person, well, if we grow up, in our early relational patterns and wiring and all of that kind of teaches us, wow, when I smell this air, I do well. When I smell this air, it hurts. Then we get wired to be able to kind of recognize the good guys and the bad guys. But then a lot of times things go wrong with our trust muscle as well. And you get wounded early in life, you don't trust enough, or you get maybe gaslighted by a narcissistic primary relationship, and you're blinded to certain kinds of people, or you just don't have good enough boundaries to say no when something smells funny. There's a lot of ways that we get into trouble. And Joel, Jordan, I'm sorry, I say Joel. One of the big problems is when we get into a state of need, then our vision can really get screwy. I've seen companies, a key player will leave or retire or something, and we got to find somebody. We got to fill this, and then if you hadn't had a date in 5 years, anybody looks good. So need affects it. There's a lot of things that affect it.
So, Dr. Cloud, what we were talking about is this idea that, in your personal life and in our business lives and almost everything we do, we have to be a little bit careful of how we trust so that we don't get burned. On the other hand, you also talk about the need in a trusting relationship for carelessness. Help me understand that dichotomy.
Well, carelessness, if you're looking at a train, it's sort of the caboose. It's kind of the fruit of trust working well. Like, right now, you're not worried about your microphone. You've been focusing on our conversation. You're not sitting there having to take care of it, hoping the thing doesn't fall off or whatever. You got, all your money in the bank. You're not obsessing about, oh my gosh, did they lock the doors last night? Did they steal it? You're careless in the meaning you're not having to guard yourself. You're not having to take care of something that you've entrusted to somebody else, which is why trust is the fuel that scales everything in life. Like, you have a lot of listeners that, they run businesses or own businesses or run a department or whatever. If you're going to scale this thing and you want somebody to go acquire another company or go open up another region or something, you've got to be able to send them and trust them and know they're going to pull it off so you can focus on what you got to do. And if that thing really grows, you're going to be doing more trusting than you ever imagined. And so you don't want to be lying awake at night, worrying about something, taking care. You want to be careless enough that you can trust them. But please don't be careless in the beginning. It's not the engine, it's the caboose.
So the goal is to get to this carelessness. You had mentioned before this idea that there were some check boxes, right? Tactically, there's some things we can do to start trying to better understand if this is going to be a trusting relationship. Talk about the 5 essentials of trust.
All right. Well, it all begins, and you being a physician, you understand this, that we are literally biologically and neurologically wired to lean into and to trust, and our system open up to someone when we, you've heard friend or foe, someone when we, through mirror neurons, when we get the feeling that they are focused on me and understand me. It basically comes down to, and I hate to sound like the shrink oversimplifying things, but this is brain science. It comes down to listening. If you've got a customer, for example, and they really feel like you have really listened to their needs and you understand what's important to them, you understand what they're afraid of, you understand what hurts them, you understand why this thing can't break or whatever it is, they start to nod because they feel, oh, he gets me. He knows what we need. Or you get a vendor, they really understand our business and they understand. When they begin to feel that, then they're starting to open up. I was talking about this in a leadership event one time, and a guy walks up to me and said, yeah, I'm the lead hostage negotiator for the FBI. And everything you just talked about is our training program. But see, people in business and the rest of life, anybody's a go-getter, we kind of want to go in and talk somebody into trusting us, right? Oh, this is a good deal. You won't believe it. And we're going to persuade them first. You're not going to persuade somebody who's not listening to you, and they don't listen to you until they feel like you've listened to them. So that's number one. I talked about, I had a couple of knee replacements in the last year, and I went into one surgeon and he looks at the X-ray. Oh yeah, I understand what's going on. You need a total knee replacement, and why don't you schedule it? And kind of walked out the door. I mean, literally, I stopped and I said, wait a minute. All you're going to do is look at an X-ray and amputate my leg. I mean, wait, I didn't feel like he listened to me at all. And so I went to see another surgeon. He starts with, so tell me about the pain. I looked at your X-ray, man. This thing, you must be hurting. Tell me, when did it start? How does it affect you? And started to really kind of, and I'm feeling myself, oh, I like this guy better because it felt like I existed, right? So somebody understands us, right? Well, that's number one. Well, number two, let's go back to the knee surgeon. I interviewed 3 of them, and one of them really understood me, but then he goes, yeah, this is, and hold on a second. And he yells out there, hey, bring him, all of a sudden his team of residents come in, and it's in one of the big training hospitals. And he goes, come here and look. And we can use, this is exactly what we're talking about in that paper. And, we're going to get the stats on this. And I think we can use it. And all of a sudden I'm realizing the second one, his motive. Look, I don't mind people. We all have self-interest. We need to have self-interest in any deal or in life. But it felt like it was all about his interest and not mine. His motive for being there was I was going to be a hamster in his project, not somebody that he was also interested in maybe how I needed this thing to turn out. And so we look at somebody's motives, and you'll be able to tell it's basically about what's their agenda. I mean, if you've ever been on a board, the organization, the company has a mission, right? But you get a board member and they've got their own agenda that they're driving instead of their motive being, how do we serve the whole and the whole thing, or even on a team, or even in a marriage? If one person, if it's all about them and what they want, it just doesn't, it's basic self-centeredness. So they've got to be able to check the box of they're not only interested in themselves, but they really want good for me. They are for me. They want to make sure I'm okay. Back to carelessness. They've got my back, even when I'm not there. And that's somebody with good motives. Let's say you got a business partner, they're going out and cutting a deal, and they know, well, it'd be good for their side of the, the ledger. But then they're thinking, well, how's this going to affect my partner? So it's that. It's are they in it just for the buck or just for what matters to them? Are they also interested? Are they for me and my interests? So that's the second one. So now my surgeon's all ready to go. He's for me. I know he wants to get me back on the golf course. He wants me to win. He cares about how my pain is doing. And then all of a sudden he says, and I can't wait to operate it on your knee because I'm an OB-GYN and I've never done a knee before. This is going to be exciting. I go, whoa, right? So the third box we got to check is ability. Do they, even though they might care and listen and be for me, but do they have the ability to pull off what I'm interested in them? Now, in business, for example, this happens all the time. How many friends, they're great friends. They go, we have so much fun together. We talk about business. We should start a company together. We should start and you trust this person implicitly, but you get into a business partnership with them and you realize they don't really have the ability to run a business. They were successful because they were working in somebody else's business. Now I got a business partner. I feel like I'm rowing the boat all by myself. And you have that feeling because a particular ability for that context, wasn't there. I got called into a company one time where the CEO was languishing and they wanted CEO coaching. And I said, well, what's going on? And they told me this story. And I said, how did he become the CEO? And they said, well, he was a COO for 10 years. And he was so successful and he reorganized, supply chains and infrastructure and oversaw, and it was incredible. And everybody loved him. And so the CEO retired and we made him the CEO. And I said, where do you get the E? They said, what do you mean? I said, well, he was a COO. Now he's a CEO. Where did he get the E? And they said, well, we promoted. I said, no, you gave him the chair, but where did he get the chip? The E chip, because as I look at this scenario, you've got a great operator here, and he was a COO, but you don't have CEO functioning. And that's why all the areas you're telling me about are languishing. He doesn't right now, at least, have the skills and abilities that we can see if he can develop those. But they trusted him implicitly for good reason. But we got to know somebody's got the ability to pull off what we're interested in. And then so we check all those boxes. Well, then you got to look at the next one, which is character. And what I don't only mean, and certainly we have to mean this, when people speak of character, often they're just thinking about, what we call basic integrity, and they don't lie, cheat, or steal. I can trust them. Can you trust that? Oh, yeah, he'd never lie to me, or she'd never tell, So we trust their character. Well, wait a minute. That's moral functioning, which is foundational. If somebody lies, cheats, and steals, fire them, right? Or do something to quarantine yourself from them, because you can't do anything if somebody's lying to you. But when my girls were 5 and 6 years old, they knew what lie, cheat, and steal meant, but they weren't ready to run a business or, to have something big entrusted to them. In this part of character, we're talking about somebody's makeup, how they're glued together. Back to the surgeon, competent, understanding, great motive. But what if he says, I'm about to do one of these surgeries. We got a theater around the OR. If you want to watch how this works, feel free. So I go to the theater and I'm watching my surgeon, Mr. Competent, Dr. Competent, and he opens up the guy's leg and 5 minutes into it, he goes, oh my gosh, he's bleeding. Somebody, oh no, he stopped the bleeding. Well, I need somebody that's got the makeup of cool under pressure, right? And you're going to put somebody in charge of a turnaround project, for example, if they're the type that have to have a lot of attagirls or attaboys and positive feedback all the time to feel good about themselves, there's not going to be any good news for a year. You need to send somebody in there who loves to eat problems for breakfast. Now, you might trust the other person in another role, but how are they glued together? I had a brother-in-law as a Navy SEAL. I would trust him to guard me against, the bad guys who are coming after me. But Mark's not the one I was going to call in the dark night of the soul when my dog dies. He's going, shut up. What's wrong with you? It's just a dog. But my empathic friends, I'm not going to called to guard me against, people coming to attack me. So we have to look at how somebody's constructed. And that's, you get into businesses and relationships like this, and somebody's makeup is a big deal. The long-term research, you get to a C-suite, for example, and Harvard studied this forever. Everybody looks alike, same IQ and same background, same education, all this, but 90% of the real difference in the superstars has to do with their personal makeup, how they're constructed, how they're glued together. And then the fifth one is what happened the last time, the track record. Always the best predictor of the future is the past. That doesn't mean somebody can't have a horrible train wreck or a past and become great, but you don't see them have a horrible past and the next day be great, like a New Year's resolution. What you see is they develop a new past, and you trust that. So we have to see some sort of track record that somebody has been able to do what we're asking them to do. Now, that doesn't mean that somebody's run one kind of a company in one business can go to a totally different business and not. Of course, they can succeed, but they've got the competencies and they've proven those over time that transfer.
So let's talk about when the track record goes wrong. I'm thinking about what's been happening with Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank. They both have been in the news as bank failures. Let's say you're hired by the local savings and loan, and they say, how do we start crafting this message to get the public to start trusting us again after these big fallouts? And we're talking about business here, but I think this also can do with you if you're an employee. Or what if the track record goes astray? How do we rebuild that trust?
Well, it's a great question because really, brands survive on the trust. If they come out with a lot of excuses and blaming and all of that, and our persuasion of, the long-term markets did this and, we didn't control the interest rates, but we were blah, 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 blah. They better come out with that first box we talked about of having everybody understand that they understand what they did and how this affected people. And basically they got to start with, we get it. We've really eroded your trust here. And we've caused a lot of damage to you. And we know what this does to business. That's why we're taking this so seriously. So I think they've got to start there. And another thing, Doc, is that this can't be done in just a press release. Trust comes from proximity. And I think what they've got to do is they've got to create some real closeness to key stakeholders and an experience of that closeness to the concentric circles of the people whose trust they've got to build. This is when key executives and CEOs need to get on airplanes and go sit down face to face with the right people and care enough to go there. I can't tell you how many problematic situations I've seen and been called into, and the difference when the CEO or somebody of power goes and visits, when they show up and they listen to the people and they feel understood, that's the foundation. Because now at least we have that neurological connection. And, you can build this on Zoom, but you can better use Zoom to build something that you did in a room. And I just think they need to create as much proximity as they can. That's part of it. And then they've got to, if you just go down the list, when the people start to feel like their motive is really to serve them and their interests, and not just try. I mean, we all do business with entities where we get some notice or this, that, and the other. We can see they're just trying to cut costs. They don't really care about how this affects me or whatever it is. They've got to show people that it's not just them that they're interested in, that it's the other side. And then they got to work down the list. There were some key competencies that they missed. I mean, when a lot of people were saying, when the money was so cheap and they were loading everything and they got their short and their long-term risk and reward upside down is basically what happens. And a lot of people are looking at that going, and voicing this, and nobody's really listening. So anyway, I think they got to work through this and ask. And what I tell people in business when I've done this model, I've used this model for literally 20 years, maybe. And we just take the categories and number one, say, okay, what in our business, how can we help the stakeholders know that we really get it? So we list those activities and then we put names to the activities. Who's going to own that one? Who's going to call that relationship? Who's going to design this communication? And you've really got to have almost in the same way that you got a business strategy. I like to see people have trust strategies. It's almost like a strategic plan. And another example is inside of companies. I just did this with the general counsel's office with a global entity. And the vision was we want to change the general counsel's office from the department of no, because that's how everybody feels about, well, run this past the lawyers. No, lawyers say you can't do this deal. No, lawyers say it's too rich. No, lawyers say you got too much exposure. They said, our vision is as general counsel, we want to become the department of yes. We want to be trusted that you can come to us and we're going to find a legal way to do what you want to do. That's trust. And they had a strategic plan of how to do that. And you got to focus on it. You just do.
So understanding motive, character, ability, and track record, something for our individual relationships as well as our business relationships. The book is Trust, knowing when to give it, when to withhold it, how to earn it, and how to fix it when it gets broken. Dr. Henry Cloud, tell us where and when the book is available.
Well, the book is available March 28th. It hits wherever books are sold. You can go to all that. If you hear this before then or that week, if you go to drcloud.com/trust, you will also get access. I think if it's still running then, whenever you hear this, you get access to a live event I'm going to do on this. And you can stream that. I think you get permission to stream it for the rest of the year. You play it for a whole company, you can play it for a team, you can play it for an individual, and it's free if you just buy the book.
Well, Dr. Henry Cloud, thank you for coming down to the basement. We appreciate having you.
I really enjoyed it. Thank you for having me.
Thanks again to Dr. Henry Cloud for joining us. And thanks to you, Doc G, for a great interview, man. What's a big takeaway you really get from this discussion?
I have to tell you, this book fundamentally changed my way about thinking about trust. And the truth of the matter is, we often don't think about it very much. We either have this gut feeling that we should or shouldn't trust people, or sometimes our default is just not to trust. And this book did a really good job of running through what trust is, how we go about thinking about trust. And ultimately, what I took out of this in the end is we need trust for so much. We need them for our personal relationships. We need it also for our business relationships, like to be a good employer or to be a good employee, to trust someone you're investing with. All of these things are things that come up all the time in our economic lives, and yet we never really codify what makes a good trusting relationship. And I think Dr. Cloud answers that. And so I thought it was just a really great take on something that we do without thinking very consciously about.
It is interesting that a lot of these basic things like trust, we don't think about the why behind it. And often I find that we have these competing mores, I guess, because we've never examined them. So because we haven't examined them, we don't understand why we think the way we do.
Yeah, and the truth about it is, a lot of times our relationships don't work out right. And sometimes we have that gut feeling, like you're like, okay, this guy I was working with, or this person I went into business with, or even a spouse, you're like, something doesn't feel right here. And yet I can't put words on what it is. And often that actually is trust. And we just don't know how to think about it in any way, kind of organized manner, which is kind of what's laid out in this book. And I think what could really help us in our relationships.
Well, and I like how often it's not them. It's just you understanding the nature of the relationship better.
It's definitely a two-way street, right? So not only do the people we interact with have to be trustworthy, but we also have to be willing to give our trust. And so it very much is something that's a very active interaction between two different people.
Well, this is very much an interview in the style of Earn and Invest. What's coming up on the Earn and Invest podcast?
On the Earn and Invest podcast, we are continuing to have the conversations that push past the 101 to the 201. I just had Andrew and Dave Ahern from Investing for Beginners. That's Andrew Sather and Dave Ahern. They have an amazing podcast called Investing with Beginners, and we talk about how you go about thinking about the stock market and investing. It was a really great conversation. It was wonderful to have them on. And coming up next, we're talking to Doug Cunnington. He is an entrepreneur, but almost by accident. It was quite unexpected. He kept on going through corporate America, telling himself he couldn't be an entrepreneur, but eventually he started doing the things he was deeply interested in, the things he liked doing, and he became an entrepreneur even though he didn't think he had it in him. And I think a lot of us are like this, Joe. We get to this point where we know that corporate America isn't fitting us, but we've always told ourselves that entrepreneurship is something that we can't do or is not what we're about. And yet when we start doing the things we like, we find that the steps maybe aren't as difficult as we thought.
I love Doug Cunnington. What a great giving guy. He and his co-host Carl Jensen have the Mile High 5 podcast, which is a lot of fun and people should definitely check out. Maybe what you're saying is it's time to trust our intuition, Doc. Is that what you're saying? Time to trust?
Trust in yourself, man. You can do it.